Some others have written some little lists lately that are getting better and better, more direct and more clear, and less complicated and less general. And we're going to read Jan Otis here as an example of a good little list. I'll read a few of them. Let's see, she said, one, I'll separate my mind from the vehicle I'm using in all thoughts and actions. When when the vehicle has difficulty with confusion or lack of clarity, then she says, vehicle, stop that. You can convey this thought clearly. Now stop and zero in on the thought and then speak. Now you see how simple and direct that is. Impatience. Vehicle, stop that. There's no reason to feel impatient. Relax and listen to what is being said. And then she says, also during the day, I'll repeat, vehicle, you will not feel impatience toward any classmate or any situation. There is nothing that can happen that can make you feel impatient. In other words, she's doing two things. She's got a program to frequently think about during the day, even if that situation is not occurring. So she's pre-programming in a way. So, and then she's got a program, a direct quote type program, when the symptom begins to occur, and when she begins to then speak to the vehicle in a more direct way, saying, stop that, or you're not going to feel that way. That's a false signal. You know, these are, you've got to, these are good little examples of how, like for moving slowly. Vehicle, you're going to do things quickly. And then in parentheses, without wasted time or motion or effort. You have the time it takes for a matchstick to burn to do this, whatever that means.
Burns pretty fast.
Yeah, burns pretty fast.
But the point we're getting at is this: you don't need any philosophical phrases. You know, all you need are simple words. And in my mind, that's the way I handle it.
Right, and this sends a very clear signal out to the world. Very clear signal.
Direct and clear, no flowers. But if you send them a philosophical phrase, they may interpret it on their own level. But this, there's no way they can misinterpret it. Can you all? Does that help you all to understand how to do this?
Very simple terminology. Very direct, just like you would correct a child. And you don't say, now, child, that isn't the way that we've learned in school to do this and that isn't really correct thinking. You know, I can't even come up with what would be such a sloppy, unnecessarily extended thing to say. You just want to be direct, quick, simple. The thing that you are trying, though, now to add to these is consciously recognizing that when you have any of those feelings that we have labeled weaknesses or faults in the vehicle or less than right actions that surface, to realize that all of them are symptoms. Symptoms of incorrect either malnourishment chemically or chemical imbalance, or that doesn't mean the source is you, but your genetic history has had that characteristic. Therefore, you're a channel for that circuitry. You understand that? But if you would recognize that anytime you feel one of those symptoms, I'm just repeating what we've said before, that at that moment, the vulnerability of your genetic weakness is being, the button is being pushed And if you feel anything, you've got to recognize that the interpretation of what you're feeling is not correct. It's the programming of what you thought it was is obsolete, and it's merely an immature development, something that has not taken place in the vehicle yet because it's too primitive, or something that has gone off balance that needs correction. And if you would recognize that during the time you're feeling that you have not the capacity to see clearly or to judge anything, and that what you think is happening is not what is happening. Therefore, just recognize the symptom, or how you have been taught to realize that the symptom could cause this poor response, whatever that poor response is. And then you immediately counter that symptom with the remedy of no, you don't need to feel that way. You don't need to act that way. There's no reason to. That's just false programming. That's just inaccurate programming. And even if it continues, you just continue to put up the wall so that it will butt its head against it and can't respond. And no feeling of guilt, no feeling of shame or embarrassment because you're dealing with it. It has nothing to do with it. That's wasted. Even if you slip and give into it for a moment, which you certainly shouldn't do, or which you should try not to do. I don't want to say shouldn't do, because according to your old programming, when I say shouldn't do, you think, uh-oh, shame, guilt. You see what I'm saying? So it's something you should try not to do. But even if you did slip a moment, then you try to quickly recover and make whatever adjustments possible. Like, for example, some adjustments that we have said might be like if a word did slip out, then you quickly recognize that word. Let the person who heard that word slip out know that you recognize that word, so that you're not affecting them by the fact that you slipped for a moment. And the way you let them know that is by an apology and saying, "Goodness, I shouldn't have. That came out, and I did not want it to. I did not have the control I would have liked to have had." Now, there are times when, and this is a very difficult topic to talk about because your programming is very immature in relation to this topic. But there are times when your best effort isn't good enough to stop the malfunction of the vehicle, but your old programming then would tell you, oh well, then that's okay because my teacher said my best effort sometimes isn't good enough to stop it, and that's not the way you're not going to get anywhere in the direction of improvement or better control if you permit yourself to justify any of those circumstances. I am designed to not be capable of knowing, and you're designed to not be capable of knowing where the limit is of what you are capable of controlling. Because if you knew that limit, then you would stop applying effort. And your task is not to correct those vehicles. Your task is what you're doing for the world, and therefore your effort to correct those vehicles has to be constant, regardless of the capacity of the vehicle to respond to your correction. And your attitude has to be that if I did not succeed, I am going to learn a new angle or some new approach so that I can succeed better than I have before in preventing my vehicle from giving in to any of those signals that would cause a poor conduct or permitting a wrong thought. Do you all follow that kind of thinking? Was that clear, Steve?
How about y'all?
Are you saying that, in other words, we just, no matter what we're experiencing, whether it's failure to control the vehicle or success, we still don't stop there. We keep applying more effort and finding ways to do better, no matter how good we might think we're doing.
That's right. And the success that you have in controlling the vehicle should never be satisfactorily evaluated. Because remember, the next level, each time he thinks he might have been successful in controlling it, he readjusts his judgment of what success is. And it has a higher perception of it than he had a moment ago, and he realizes that he could have done it better. So he never considered his effort totally successful, because to consider it totally successful would mean that there's no room for improvement. So no matter what the control was, it's not, it can be improved upon. And no matter what the degree of even maybe wanting to label it failure, if not success, or a minor failure, they're both false. They're both false. In other words, you're not capable of evaluating your effort either way. You're not capable of labeling it failure or success. That's not your job. We didn't ask you to go label your effort each time you apply this as to whether or not you succeeded or failed. We asked you to apply the effort and to continue to increase it and to try to do better. But you get something in the way when you try to evaluate it. If you evaluate your effort and you think, I failed, then it boomerangs on you and you have something else to deal with. You have guilt and shame and embarrassment. And usually anytime an individual feels that they failed, they immediately go find fault with someone in order to get rid of that guilt, in order to try to fluff it off. You know that? It's almost a sure pattern that if I am trying to do something and I feel like I am not succeeding at it as well as I would like to succeed, then I'm going to give you trouble. Now, I may not know that in my conscious mind, but it's time you all grow up and recognize in your conscious mind that that's the way the vehicle responds. And that, now, you can get that picture once more. Let's say I'm trying to control sensuality and our sensuous thoughts, and I recognize that my appraisal is that I'm having more sensuous thoughts or feelings than I should be having, and my appraisal is that I'm falling down on the job, that I have entertained it. Maybe I didn't entertain it enough to get the label of being complete flop, but I've entertained it enough that I have let guilt and an appraisal of some sort, some degree of failure come in. Anytime that occurs, I'm going to go direct my disappointment in myself at someone else. Might be to several individuals, or to my lab crew, or it might be to another individual. But 9 times out of 10, when someone is releasing their hostility on someone else, it's because of their own guilt that they are suffering because of their own failure. Now, that guilt should not be suffered. That guilt has added to their problem. That guilt shouldn't even exist. So you say, well, then what do I do when I recognize, if I can't go to guilt, if I recognize or that I have done less than what I should do in the circumstance. You don't recognize it. You merely try harder. You don't assess it. You just merely say, I am going to learn more tricks. I am going to approach this differently. There's something that I must be taught by what I am experiencing here. But the moment you call it, label it a negative, I have failed to a degree, then it boomerangs into something I have to spill off on someone else. You all understand that? And you see humans do it all the time. I'm sure those of you without a craft task, every time they are disappointed in their own efforts, it's not conscious. They don't know that they're doing it, but they will always begin to find fault in others if they are uptight about their own poor performance.
And if there's no one around, they'll take it out on the cat.
Yeah, that's right. I don't know if you could hear that. The airplanes are so loud, but she said if there's no one around, they'll take it out on the cat or the dog. Okay, is that enough said on that?
Do y'all have any questions? Did y'all bring any questions from the crowd? Couple of
Okay.
what? Couple of what?
A couple he scribbled. He's speaking very softly today.
While he's looking, Rhoda, what's your question?
I have one question regarding placement of phones. And I was wondering if we weren't quite sure when we got back to the crafts and we were going over our notes last time, and we were wondering if it would be right to, if you intended for us to get behind the bump to be able to make it up on both sides when there was room to do so, or if the bump would be right up against the wall.
It depends upon the many things. We can't answer that blanket. It depends upon the space you have in the room. And like when some quarters are tight, we never do. Sometimes T and I would go in some of your quarters after we hadn't been into a rest chamber sometimes and find the bunks almost in the middle of the room because they got pushed further and further from the wall so that they were easier to make up. And it didn't seem right to us
I think
that you leave them in a space where you have just the minimum needed space to make up the bunk. Go ahead, Pete.
I think what we agreed upon some time ago, unless it's been changed since then, far enough away from the wall so that the blanket can hang down on the floor. I mean, on the side of the bed.
Yeah, so that it would hang and the wall wouldn't stop
I don't
it.
think you need to be where you can get around it.
No, if you like, let's say that the side of the bed is, the long side of the bed is against the wall. If there's just room for the covers to hang, but you don't need a hand or a foot or some measurement to keep it away from the wall. Just room for the covers to drop. Because we'd all like to give as much traffic space in the area as we can. What was your question?
There's a couple of parts to it. I'm sure how you want to lay them. But the main question is,
Speak loudly.
the main question is, in our vehicles, with our next level line, how much of our next level line actually gets put into the Jeep? I'm trying to figure out. I was listening to the question came up. I was listening to the tapes that were made about how Adam and Eve did this, and I started thinking about how does, if their next level line has gotten into their genes and those genes were passed on, how much of that line is actually passed on? And then that thought led me to think about, well, what about those that have been in this class for a while that dropped away? If their minds were in their genes and they passed on offspring, how much of that mind would be put into the population?
How much of that mind?
How much of that mind would actually get passed on?
Next level mind?
Yeah.
That's not next level mind. It's evolved conduct, evolved thinking. It's a better way of doing things. But none of your so-called next level mind is going to remain with this vehicle, though you are changing programming of the vehicle to the degree of what the vehicle can take. If you're doing all you can do. In other words, it's like you have a sponge and you're trying to saturate the sponge. But different sponges have different densities, and some can hold more than others. But your job is you will never know what your sponge can hold. In other words, you want to saturate the genes of your vehicle. And even as an example, the genes of those around you with a next level conduct. But, and your mind, during the time that it is occupying, your next level mind, during the time it's occupying that vehicle, is programming the more advanced ways and conduct and so forth of the vehicle, of the genes. Your mind is programming those genes. But that doesn't mean you're losing any of your next level mind because you've deposited in those genes. Okay. Therefore, no next level mind in the real sense. It's just increased programming. It's true that it will make that vehicle and the mind of the vehicle, the mind being the program that stays there, the living program, that can't be killed when the vehicle is killed. And don't get off and think we're talking about spirit. But the living program, I lost my thought. The living program will be increased by your visit, or have grown by the visit of your mind. Now, you said a couple things that threw me there when you brought Adam and Eve into the picture.
Your thoughts started turning in my mind by listening to some new tapes about trying to explain what happened.
Well, now, wait a minute, because I thought we weren't listening to old tapes, past tapes made in Houston retreats. Okay, go ahead.
It was about, Lisa was trying to explain, a couple of tapes to try and explain it, what happened with Adam and Eve and how...
I don't remember that.
Well, I don't believe, yes, I don't know that was in Houston, was it? That Adam and Eve, or was that in Blackhawk?
I believe it's tapes number...
We don't know the numbers. Well, let me say something about Adam and Eve, or Adam anyway, because when Adam was, let's say he was a member of the next level, and he had a vehicle, so to speak, but his next level mind wasn't functioning. He was using the brain of the vehicle, is more or less what I would say. You know what I'm...
Or you're saying, what
words,
kind of vehicle did he have?
He had a vehicle, I don't know what kind of vehicle it was. And we may even be talking about legends, and we've used Adam and Eve as an example. You see what I'm saying? Because the more we grow, the less we see the influence of Adam and Eve. At least I do. I don't know about
Yes, we've gotten to grow now. I'll have to go back and rethink Adam and Eve all over again,
right.
because I can't even tune into that.
It just doesn't jive, A lot of things just don't jive in my mind now. And but thinking about it, the question is what kind of vehicle Adam and Eve had. I don't know now. Way back when we talked about it, I had an idea, but I don't now, which sounds crazy.
And it might have changed entirely. We might have a complete update on that. We'll think about it. But
Because at the time we were thinking that you all were converting these vehicles, right?
Well, it came up that that period might have been a period when some graphic was done, like a missing link, to help bring them up a notch, the vehicles that were on the plan.
Well, see, we see now that it's in the genes that they're upgrading. You understand that? In other words, it isn't the vehicle. Of course, I can't even remember what you're talking about.
I
you know.
can't either.
So,
Funny.
this is strange, because, but you can see the growth, as we've come along. And, but now we see that the upgrading is in the genes, in the knowledge that is fed to them, rather than whatever it was we talked about, because I don't even, well, I don't keep anything I don't need, I tell you.
I love you. Well, this very important statement that T just made, that she doesn't keep things she doesn't need. And,
So you just discard that and think about something else.
I have another question.
Maybe those old tapes aren't worth listening.
maybe they're too obsolete.
What we wanted you to listen to, which we thought were the ones that were in Houston, were the ones about Jesus. That's what we were thinking about at the time. And
Was this one about genes that you're talking about?
It was, I think it did from a question I'd originally asked.
if you were the cause of the death.
Because it was about, we were trying to figure out how the genes progressed in the vehicle, and talking about missing links. And I asked the question of, well, would something like Adam and Eve then be like a graph or a way to bring up a primitive state of the whole his genetic development?
Or in their genetics.
It was like a gene bank.
Goodness, I'm going to have to listen to that tape.
Well, I think because we haven't retained it, I would disregard it.
Yeah.
In other words, let's, the things that sounds like they have kind of been updated or don't seem right, just kind of overlook it and try to get some of the things that we're working on right now out of the tape. Because it's a step-by-step method of getting you where you are now. And that part of it is what you don't need to really know about it.
See, you can look at where, we still believe that that the next level, just to put this in a nutshell, that the next level at a given time took the evolutionary link away that tied what we would now label human to animal. They took that link away. And therefore, then suddenly the label man could apply down only so low to a creature who was upright and capable of language and capable of doing what we consider humans to do. And the next level took that link away so that those could advance more without new ones coming in. And now we'll skip all the way to, and just use Jesus as an example. And this is not to say that others did not precede him, possibly. But like Enoch, Moses, we're not saying that they, but Jesus, for example, came in or was sent in to really accelerate genetic development by programming. In other words, the next level programs in two ways, and both are needed. One is the program that they do when they're in sending signals, radio signals, of ideas and things, and people pick up on them, like scientists and builders of aircrafts and heart surgeons and everything you can think of. The next level feeds those little humans who look for wanting to do something constructive through science and medicine and new ideas. And so that's one way the next level brings information to them. Another way the next level brings, which is equally as important, is by periodically entering into the kingdom level, the human kingdom level itself, and programming vehicles during that presence. Because it does a different type of thing on the genetic improvements. It programs in a way that, well, all I can say is it's different, and that both are needed. At least, let me say, whether they're needed or not, the next level has chosen to do both. And so it must be needed, or at least they might get tired of the way the plants are growing and decide, well, we can speed things up if we send somebody in, and it will give them some experience and prepare them for things that they might do for us elsewhere at another time better if they have the experience of going and being housed in a very primitive vehicle and trying to program the airwaves by being down in the airwaves with the way we have recently understood it, by your vehicle being receptacle of certain things because of its own flaws and weaknesses. You all understand that? Did I leave too much out, or did you ready?
One thing I was wondering about is, it seems like the genes that have started on this planet from the very primitive beginning and gone through all types of animals and different life forms to eventually get to the point where at someday they may be ready to be a young member of the next level. They would have gone through an experience that was literally hell on earth. And once they got to the next level, they would be so incredibly strong that...
Not really, because it depends upon your definition of strength. Because also the more they grow, the more gentle they become, and the more refined their conduct becomes. And so they aren't strong in a lot of the ways that were previously labeled strong. It's just like you all have not been strong in dealing with these vehicles. Your minds had forgotten how to deal with primitive vehicles because it was so long ago that you were naturally in this condition. Do you follow that? And it was a conflict to you. It was a very hard thing to do. And I feel like some of those who should have done it almost retreated because they just couldn't handle it, didn't want to deal with it, or couldn't handle it. Don't know. Do you know what I'm talking about? Some of those, say, members of your class who were sent and who did not get sufficient control to do the task of sending out the signals in the way that they should. It might have been because the vehicle was so primitive that and this isn't to excuse them, because all of you have primitive vehicles. The vehicles you have are just as primitive as any of your classmates who should be sitting where you are. Do you follow what we're saying? But it doesn't really make you strong. It makes you wise, and you're strong in wisdom. Your minds, your next level minds, know an awful lot, and very little of that has been brought into these vehicles. Now, you're going to learn. You're getting a refresher course. No, not a refresher course, because when you are, it's hard to say, but when you were at this level naturally, you didn't know where you were. You couldn't see it for what it was. So when you're in this level unnaturally, you can see it for what it is. And that you will have learned is new for you. that is new wisdom that you are taking into your next level life. Do you follow that?
Strength in a certain sense, you have overcoming different things of the world, if that's what you're talking about. But it doesn't make you strong enough where you could do a task like this.
Well, but you overcame gradually when you were doing it in a natural condition, so that the degree of overcoming was easy for you, relatively easy, because you just had to push a little way each time, or the genes did, and as the mind travels with the genes. It just had to push a little way in each lifetime as it progressed upwards.
But
You
that's
see?
it.
And then for you to come and intercept in a vehicle that is as primitive as it is, it's a kind of strength required that you never knew how to exert.
What about the genetic structure of one of these vehicles that's moving upward as it becomes more refined? If it gets to a point where it can graduate off this garden and become a member of the next level, it seems like going up through this kind of stage, as opposed to graduating from another planet where the motivation to grow will be for thirst for goodness or something else, they would have an incredible amount of strength.
Well, now, thirst for goodness is, no. See,
Well,
excuse me, go ahead.
well, I think maybe the picture that I see is different than what you see, but in my mind, one individual isn't the only one growing. In other words, the whole civilization is going toward becoming members of the next level.
Now, he's
So
not
in a
saying
sense-
everybody's going to make it.
No,
And-
because they will drop away. There will be many that are discarded. But so therefore the strength is different. It's going through a process of many, many years of human civilization. I'm not talking about just several. I mean, it might be millions of years before they have the vehicle with what's inside of it, the genes and all, that can enter the next kingdom, enter the kingdom of the members of the next level. Can you understand that? So therefore, it's not a matter of strength. It's a matter of refinement.
Yes, it's a matter of step by step
Getting rid of these bad habits.
improvement, better nutrition, less pollution, better conduct, better. It's just a matter of advancement. That's the reason we talk about being more civilized, because people can relate to that. Even though their idea of what's being civilized, a lot of it is pseudo-civilized. It really isn't very civilized. But that's one way that we can think about it. It's better than saying you've got to become more religious, because religion is such an unreal world
And
they have
even down
created.
pro religion, you know. In other words, your mind, right now, is very, very old as far as rating it on the human, going through the human kingdom. Our minds are even older because we've gone through the process of becoming members of the next level, same as you, and plus the age that we have in the next level, and we don't feel like you all are as young as we used to think you were, because of the fact that you wouldn't be on this task if you were young, because they don't send individuals on tasks like this if they are incapable of doing it.
You all haven't just popped into the next level.
Right, like we used to think. Now, we used to talk about how people would just choose to do something like this in a world of other humans who don't want to do it, and that's obsolete. In other words, the whole civilization is brought up together.
That doesn't mean they're all at the same level.
No.
It means that the most primitive that exists, right on up the level, they're all moving up. It's like the group that you're primarily making communication with as they respond positively, they're making communication with, and they're making communication with, and they're on down. Even maybe some little bit of what you are making communication with goes down. Maybe not all of it is through each strata, but your primary effort is to the upper strata, even though the upper strata is very low compared to the strata that they're going to have to reach by the time they get there. Funny thing is, you mentioned something else that just like Sorority's Adam and Eve picture threw me, because I can't even think about Adam and Eve any longer. Well, I have to think about it. But when you said another garden where they had different motivation, and as compared to this garden with knowing what we now know, I wouldn't be a bit surprised if all gardens would grow exactly the same way this garden grows, because it's such a beautiful plant. We have grown enough to see that it isn't as awful as we thought it was. When we were thinking of it as being so awful, it was because we were relating so to the level of this civilization, realizing how primitive it was, plus how primitive our vehicles are. And to our minds, having come to the next level, to step in at this strata in a civilization, it seems horrible and awful, and the whole picture of Satan or Lucifer or all seems so horrible, because it's like stepping into a den of wolves who are baring their teeth because they are so uncivilized. So it's not really an awful garden at all. It's a perfectly beautiful garden, but it's just in a middle condition. It's just the level of its condition. So I don't know about tea, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if all gardens don't grow just exactly like this one, and are close to it. You know,
why not?
And we've grown so much in our understanding of what's going on here, and where they are, and where you are, and why you're here. And
for us to realize who you all are, what position you all have, shot us up considerably, and we hope it shot you up as much as it shot us up, which gave us a better understanding of everything. You see that?
We couldn't understand why for so long in our ignorance we kept feeling like you all could perform so much better than you were performing. We felt like your performance ought to just be just 100% just right now on everything. And that was
on the human things.
Yes, and I think part of that is because our next level minds were seeping in, realizing that you had risen above all these characteristics, that your mind had risen above all these characteristics. But we also weren't as aware of what you were having to deal with in bringing your consciousness into those vehicles, as primitive as they were. And this isn't to excuse you. You follow what we're saying? Because we don't want to excuse you. We don't want you to excuse yourself. But we have been given so much more knowledge to understand what your task is. And actually understanding what you understand now gives you a lot better a lot more variety and a lot better ways of handling your vehicle. You know, we've compared it so many times to a horse trainer or a dog trainer controlling their animal. Well, you can hold a tight leash on that dog or that horse, and you can give it constant training. But it does not mean that it's all soaking in. Nor does it mean that it can perform everything you're teaching it, even though you keep right on programming it as if it is eventually going to be able to hold that it's bank, its memory bank, will eventually be able to hold and replay all the types of programming that you're giving it. And its bank may or may not be able to hold those things, and it may or may not be able to perform what you are teaching it. But your task is to continue to use it as the tool to send that information out. In a sense, if your vehicle, let's take Dorothy as an example, if all of Dorothy's weaknesses were correctable by Dorothy's 100% effort,